Innovation Unplugged from the Alabama Community College System's Innovation Center takes you inside Alabama's workforce development. Join us for enlightening conversations with community leaders and industry experts showcasing experiences, addressing key issues, and celebrating successes in the workforce initiatives across the state. Here we go again, Innovation Unplugged, a production of the ACCS Innovation Center. I'm Houston Blackwood. I get to be the workforce director for this group. Today, I'm joined by Julie Frizzell, our executive director.
Hello.
Yeah, and man, what a story! This guest today is quite the adventure of how he even got here. Ben Cottingham from FireSeeds, a recruiting talent development company in Birmingham, Alabama. Ben, welcome.
Thank you guys for having me. Yeah, it only took us going to Oregon to meet, even though we only lived like an hour from each other.
Yeah, and even more than that, our worlds have a Zen with one of our new staff members, and we'll get to all that. But yeah, what Ben's referencing is that we both went to Dirt World in Albany, Oregon. Is that what it was? Albany,
Yep.
Oregon. We're on the bus, and we just get to talking. It's like, where are you from? I'm like, Alabama. Well, I'm from Alabama. Where are you from? So smallest world, man. But I knew instantly, hey, we're going to invite him on the show because the story was interesting and some other features, just characteristics. I realized we need to bring that into our circle. So that's why you're here, and we're super excited. I've been when I sent the group, they're like, "Who's Ben?" I'm like, "Well, it'll make sense when you meet him." So we're good. Ben, tell us. I heard your story out in Oregon, and we connected pretty well. But what is your story? Where did you come from? How did you get to FireSeeds? And then, man, we want to hear about FireSeeds and what that does for the state.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you the, I guess, kind of a bridge version, but I'm actually an Alabama transplant. And I know I mentioned that to you guys, but grew up in Atlanta, came to actually play football at Sanford. That's what brought me here. And met my wife. She was a Birmingham girl and basically roped me into sticking around. But professionally, I actually started out in education here in Birmingham. Mm-hmm. And so really throughout my journey, college and transitioning professionally, I wanted to be a teacher and coach. Had a calling and pull to do that in an urban setting. And so actually taught at a private Christian school in urban Birmingham for a few years and was an assistant principal and athletic director. And basically through a crazy story of getting to touch a couple of capital projects while I was in education, serving in this administrative role, these people kept talking about how hard it was to find people. And site work contractors, civil engineering professionals, even developers that were helping us on this project just said, hey, we can never find people. We can't find good people. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, well, I could probably do that. I could probably connect people and help you find some folks. My wife has always said, like, he's never met a stranger, and it's pretty in tune with my personality. But
that's accurate.
Yeah.
That seed was planted, and fast forward about a year, I heard that there was a search firm in Birmingham that was doing recruitment, leadership development, and helping values-driven companies find great people. And so that caught my eye. Then I heard they were doing it in the construction and engineering space. And I said, I don't know anything about recruiting, but this is really interesting to me, and was thinking about making that transition out of education into doing something really with what my degree was in the business world. And that is very, very quickly kind of flashing forward there, but that's a little bit more just my story of how I got to FireSeeds.
Wow. That's a different move from most people who are in education to go from education back now into what we call industry, right? Mm-hmm. What were your fears doing that?
Well, great question.
That is a great question. So what were my fears? Well, the first week I asked someone, hey, is sales and business development, is that like the same thing? And they're like, yes, it is. Yeah. In all seriousness, I think, I was working 70 hours a week. I loved working with vendors. I loved taking care of our vendors when I was in education. I think that the 70, 80-hour work weeks, they were really fun. We're not the kindest in terms of thinking forward of starting our family. And loved education, loved the administration world, and just getting to go to sporting events, getting to serve kids in that community, but was really just looking for something a little different. And so I think it was a huge learning curve, but at the end of the day, again, I know even you've made that transition from educational leadership. If you can build relationships with people, sometimes if you have the right mindset, the learning curve kind of starts to change once you get into it.
You were dealing with students, teachers, other administrators,
Yep.
parents, the community,
Yep.
all of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all the above.
I think that was when I was a principal. It was in a rural school. It was a K-8 on the edge of the county, and it was a tough area. That had a lot of change and a lot of unrest in the economically, and so it took about 2 years for some of the toughest cases to come around to understand why we cared about homework, why we cared about the kids being at school on time, why we cared about actions on the bus and all the things, to the point where the parents who were calling about us and complaining early were then asking for help, before I left. And so, but it was all about the relationships and asking the right questions, but also giving that right love and coaching. And we call it training all the time. And we had a guest on a while back, and he said, you train dogs and horses. We develop and coach humans. And so thinking forward to this show, I was like, okay. And so what are your thoughts on that when you're building relationships to coach people along? Because I see that as a part of what you do. What's your philosophy, FireSeeds philosophy? And if you want to go back, tell us about FireSeeds.
Yep.
It sounds like a really neat organization.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, I'm a teacher by trade. I love teaching people. I love seeing the light bulb moment of it clicking. And I think that's translated into the marketplace, but that's why I got into education. That's why I was a teacher, and I love coaching because I love getting to do that for my kids, love getting to do that for the coaches and other teachers I served. And, I think it's probably cliche, and this is said all the time, but people don't care what you know. They care if you care. Like they want someone that cares about them and is really going to pour out into them. And I think that's translated into the marketplace. I mean, at the end of the day, I want to get to know folks' stories. I want to get to know their values. I want to see if there's alignment there. And there's the kind of people I want to work with in the for-profit space, people that I align with their values, I align with their vision and their mission, why they exist. And to speak to FireSeeds, FireSeeds has been around for about 13 years. We are a retained search firm, and we have several practice areas. And so if you're not familiar with search firms, I'll kind of zoom out real quick. People always say, oh, man, you're a recruiter. And I tell folks, the 2 ways to kill a conversation at a party is you say you're a pastor or a recruiter, and people are kind of like, well, I'm going to go get another drink, and I'll be back.
Even if you are a pastor.
Yeah, even if you are a pastor.
I need a drink.
And so, kind of breaking through that stigma, there's a lot of noise in the recruitment and talent acquisition space, and there's a lot of people that are very transactional. They just want to move on. They'll say whatever they want to do just to try to place someone with another organization. And we take a different approach. We have built our business on, serving pretty well-known brand names like a Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is probably our most well-known partner, and another practice that is dedicated to serving hospitality businesses. And so in a lot of ways, we want to work with contractors that they want to be the Chick-fil-A of construction. And we hear that a lot. These folks that really care about leadership, they really care about development, they want to have a reputation of a Chick-fil-A. And so we have a hospitality practice area where we've served 500 plus owner operators throughout the country, financial services, Christian businesses, nonprofit. And then I do a lot of our work within the AEC space, which is architecture, engineering, and construction. And so that's where I like to live.
That's how you ended up at Dirt World, for
That's
those
how I
who
ended
are
up
wondering.
in Dirt World.
Yeah.
Yep. That's how I ended up at Dirt World. And I think my wife is afraid I'm going to end up as an operator, hopping on an excavator at some point. But I love getting to serve that industry. That's where a lot of my passion is.
Yeah, that was a really neat space too in Oregon. So Dirt World is a series of things built by this other gentleman. And he spoke there, and it was an interesting conversation with him. But there, for the audience, Dirt World is where leaders from all different kinds of industries, but mostly construction related, were there. And then the speakers were all about leadership. And what I remember about that was every speaker talked about their faith and their mission and their relationships, and how their relationships at home were the most important, and then their relationships with their people. Every single speaker, even the owner, Aaron Witt, and his message was a little bit different, but every single one talked about that. So it was no secret that all those companies were there had that mission in their, in their own, when you talk to them. And then you're there, and I'm like, well, what are we doing? Like, I'm only here because I had an invitation. I had no idea what I was getting into. But that whole conversation, every conversation I had came back to those things. And I think it was the culture of that whole thing. So studying more on FireSeeds and on you, not on you particularly, I'm not a stalker, but preparing for the show.
Man.
So
It's okay if you are. No judgment.
well, yeah, we actually don't do any research. Typically, we know everybody, but you're one of the most outliers. But when you're looking at those architecture firms, construction firms, and they're looking for people, like when you say people, you're not talking about, you're not a temp agency. You're looking for the folks who are driving that company to the next level. And we do that when we develop these programs and we're working with our colleges. We're trying to help them get to the next level. What is your philosophy on that? Is what determines the level I'm in, and then what actually determines the next level that I'm working towards?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it really depends on the type of partners we're serving, the types of companies. I mean, our executive search practice, we place COOs, vice president of construction. We've done CEO search, executive directors, which that search functions a little bit differently, where in other practice areas it might be a director at a Chick-fil-A store where they're actually boots on the ground, or we'll do a field superintendent for a heavy civil contractor or asphalt paving project manager. And so the scope of that really depends. Our biggest thing is we want to approach the search. You know, you can find the technical skills, and they're probably calling us because they can't find technical skills. But we want to push into, you know, hey, we don't just want to hire you an asphalt superintendent. We don't just want to find you, you know, a director or a heavy civil project manager or an executive leader, but we want to get to know you so well that we can understand that they align with your values. And so that's really what we look at. We talk about kind of our principles, or we want to vet, make sure that we're mitigating risk and protecting our partners. We want to discern, but at the end of the day, we are relationship driven. And so we want to build authentic relationships with people. We want to get to know their story because, again, it might not align with what this person's looking for, or their values might not align perfectly. And so that's how we try to differentiate ourselves. And we also have a leadership development company, sister company called Wild Spark, that is solely focused on developing those leaders once they actually are employed by that organization. And so that's helped a lot, just helping retain talent. I think that's something y'all probably experienced a lot is, hey, we found this person, we found this CDL, or we found this operator. Now, how do we keep them to stay?
Yeah. Continuing to support them with those trainings and other opportunities for their growth and development. That's so important that you all have connected that as a simple resource in one agency. Yeah.
Tell us about that. So let me back up. Before we talk about Wild Spark, sometimes you find a really good technical candidate, and you're like, hey, Smith Company, we've got this guy, and he's the best at this technical part, but might be a little rough around the edges, or there was this thing in the past, whatever. What kind of, and I'll call it not rehabilitation, but what kind of realignment, or if you imagine when you're putting a steel building together and you've got that drift pin and it doesn't match up perfectly, but you put that drift pin in and now it fits and it's tight. Do you have a drift pin philosophy to make people match better or to facilitate the match?
Yeah, that's really good. I think the biggest thing is we just want to tell the truth. And if we have hesitations or if there is a values misalignment, I'll kind of back up, but there's this contractor in Ohio, and their motto is we hire for values. And it might mean, you know, hey, they don't check 9 out of 10, but their values alignment, maybe it's 5 or 6 out of 10, and they're super excited about the opportunity. And so, again, we would just want to tell the truth. If there's maybe a misalignment for values, but, you know, they're so excited, I want to be bold enough to coach my partner who might be an executive leader of a $100 million, $200 million company. And even though they've been there for 20 years, I want to be able to coach them and say, hey, I don't think you should hire this person because I think this is going to end up hurting you in the long run. And those are hard conversations. It does go along with, you know, hey, I want to coach. I want to be honest. I want to help them grow as a leader, which is difficult being a younger guy who's, you know, speaking to an executive at a company. But end of the day, if there's not a fit there, or if we call it kind of a gut feeling check, or it's a bad reference call, we want to be forthright with that.
Yeah. You don't want them to just check the box. I filled a position. I hired an individual. I have someone now, but they're not the fit. So knowing that they have a partner within you, I think you're also looking out for what's in their best interest, but also setting them up for success long term.
Yep, absolutely.
I think that's very similar to what we do. You know, we have 24 community colleges, and 23 of them work with us, married military. And I gotta stop saying that about them because they do a great job at what they do.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like they're not doing the right thing,
Yep.
but
Their focus is a little different.
they just don't
Yeah.
need us.
They
And
have
so,
a different student population that they, different programs
different
and things
programming,
that they use.
different purpose,
Mm-hmm.
different calling. So, but of the 23 that do workforce development, I can say they have all ran multiple courses, but they're all so different, man. You've got, you know, north, south, east, west, whatever, even sometimes even in the same metro area, you've got two completely different cultures. And then we're trying to force our standardized course right down the middle. And so we have to coach them along. And we had some guests on very recent episodes that were that needed a lot of coaching and a lot of development of how they can do what they do. So that's kind of where we are is helping them get to that in this Wild Spark idea. So that the people want to do it. They see the need for it, but they need to be developed. Either the community or the campus or the person just doesn't understand because they're all alone or whatever. Tell us about how Wild Spark works for you guys. Reading through all the things, it seemed like an incredible approach. Because once you get them there, now let's coach them, train them, develop them until they are 100%, 10 out of 10. What's that like?
Yeah. So our business motto between FireSeeds and Wild Spark is to discover, deploy, and develop leaders. And it flows really well. The hope is, hey, we're going to help you find them. We're going to launch them into your business in a very strong and powerful way. So they're going to have a huge impact. But everyone would call us back, especially when we first started FireSeeds, and say, hey, is there anything we could do to kind of develop them or help them grow as a leader, or give them a growth track, or, is there anything you could do to help us with retention? And so we started out, paper pamphlets on leadership development. We do this in-person consulting, and that actually morphed into what is today WildSpark, which is it's a software platform. And so it is technically, a SaaS model where, you could access it from your phone. It works well even for field folks, regardless of industry, whether you're working for Chick-fil-A or for a contractor or in an office setting. And so you can access it from your phone. It is a module type curriculum where, it might go through a topic of how to lead through change, when things are changing all around you, how to have hard conversations, how to handle conflict. And it's all these different conversations where you're going through the curriculum, you're working through it yourself, and you're actually having to respond and answer questions. But the best part about it is it actually facilitates group conversations once a month. And so you have a team leader, and then you might have a team of 5 to 6. Again, regardless of the industry or setting, it's a great way to get conversations going, because we go from how to have hard conversations to, hey, now we're bringing up some things in our office that we might not have talked about had we not, again, had maybe a space to talk about some of these things. And so that's the hope, is that, again, you're developing folks, you're even giving people an opportunity to lead these group discussions. And then long term, again, our hope is that it's going to drive your retention rates because there's something in place that's actually thinking for leadership development. How are we growing? How are we training? There's a focus tool that actually is centered on that.
Do you guys have, if you've got 10 different companies, so you got this Wild Spark cohort, and you've got 10 companies that have sent people, and I'm just being generic. I'm not really sure how that goes. And then, so that's 10 different, whatever they do, different widgets made. Do you develop a pathway for them to exhibit those traits in the workplace, like over a 6-month, year and a half?
Yeah, so we have a customer success team that typically checks in with our partners of, hey, what's going well? What are you maybe not seeing as much as you would have hoped? And then with that, these different modules, we can customize it to problems they're facing in their business. And so it could be, hey, we have younger millennials in our business that have a really hard time taking feedback. They're always offended, and, they hear feedback and they're not thinking, this person wants the best for me, that this person wants me to get better. They're thinking, oh man, I've messed up again, or why does this person not like me? And it embraces the idea of, hey, we're all imperfect. We all need to focus on getting better and improvement. And honestly, it's just, again, it's a great way to press into that, but we can cater it to specific partners based on maybe what they're facing.
I love that. So we come from the system office, or the community college system has ATN. which has a leadership development. We've used that a bunch and all those things. And we actually have in our food and beverage, we have conflict resolution and knife skills in our food and beverage, and on our pop-up banner, they're right beside each other.
Wow.
So it looks like that's how we're resolving conflict. Every time I stand that thing, I'm like, oh gosh, what are we doing? But for the record, we don't do it that way. But those lessons, because a lot of these, and Julie knows this, you could speak to, like, you take your great operator, your great technician, you move them to that supervisor job for the first time. Well, they've been talking turkey on the line.
Yes.
And saying things that I probably shouldn't say when you now become the boss, to your what was once your colleague. So with that, I guess, did you ever use stuff like that when you were at ZF?
Oh yeah, all the time. And we actually had an internal leadership training kind of program that we would support anyone that moved into a leadership position, no matter how experienced they were in leading and managing others, or if they were seasoned or first time leader. Developing those internal programs was always important, and it wasn't just a one and done training. It was a continual, long-term program that it wasn't optional. It was also mandatory. But I love how you said, it's getting other people together in different functions with different experiences and saying, okay, how can I learn from you? How can we learn from each other? How can we learn from the situations that we're dealing with as leaders, and be able to use those in any interactions that we have. And so we did the same thing. We did international leadership training. So it wasn't just someone from the U.S., but you had someone from Germany or China or wherever. And so you were learning from each other because you all led international teams as well. So I'm sure you encounter that also as not only, leading others and leading cross-functionally within different responsible areas, but leading amongst different cultures and different remote workers versus in-person office workers and things like that. Yeah, there's always ways to say, hey, what you encounter is not exactly what I encounter, or vice versa. So, but I can take some of those nuggets from your experiences as well. So,
I like what you said about kind of knowing whatever kind of manager role you're in, like, you have to do this. And something we see a lot is, hey, the best salesperson in the company, or the best operator on a job site, or, the best civil engineer, whatever the role might be, we kind of assume, like, okay, upward trajectory, career growth, whatever industry, okay, now they need to be in management. And it's like, well, just because they were the best foreman or operator doesn't mean that per se they've developed exactly what y'all are saying. They've developed those soft skills to actually manage and lead people.
And it takes time. It takes time to develop those skills as well. And it's hard to say, hey, I can help someone get to that level, but it's always a learning and growing pathway for everyone. So, yeah.
What would you say, speaking of that unknown pathway, I love that concept. What would you say to a young person who works in one agency who's trying to coach an older person, or I say there's an age difference, different generations, and the younger is trying to coach the older? What's that? How do y'all approach that in your philosophy?
Agency in terms of, like, within the search industry, or just any type of business per se?
Any type of business. And I'm really thinking more of just relationships in general, because we have people of certain ages on our team that are dealing with people of different ages out in the college system. And sometimes it's younger, older, from us to them, sometimes not. But how do you manage that age gap or that generational gap between those conversations? Yeah,
that's a great question. One of our core values actually at FireSeeds is 360-degree leadership. And the way we talk about it often is, we want to be able to lead to the side, we want to be able to lead down, and we want to be able to lead up. And, leading down is easier sometimes. Hey, I'm a manager, I've got a direct report, this is my job. It's a lot harder when it's, hey, person who's my equal, I want to give some feedback. I want to challenge you here. Or, hey, person who owns the business, or who's my customer, or who is 30 years ahead of me, how do I lead up and say the truth and say the thing that needs to be said, even though, that might not be received super well. And, I think it's complicated. I think at the end of the day, businesses where there's high trust and high feedback that everyone's doing what they think is best for the business, I think that can be really healthy. I think, someone who's a millennial, if I'm, talking to someone that's in their 50s, 60s, 70s, again, there's a sense of respect and honor that I want to be able to bring into that conversation where, when I first came out of school and I'm a teacher, my first principal was, 64, 65. And so we communicated differently, but we got to a place relationally where we had built so much trust that I could come to him with feedback, or I could come with things. We'd get out of a parent-teacher conference and say, hey, I don't think you should have said that. Mm-hmm. And, it was built on trust. I trusted that, hey, if I said that, he wasn't going to fire me, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, that is really a healthy culture. Mm-hmm. It's not the pizza parties. It's not the, hey, we have ping pong in the office. But can people lead up, and can they have those conversations, again, respectfully, but trust that they're not going to get fired if they do?
That's when I was assistant principal, we had a shooting threat. I don't know, anonymous. It was on Yik Yak app. It's an anonymous geo you call that? Geo-fenced. Mm-hmm. So wherever you were within an area, you could talk to people on Yik Yak. Anyway, somebody said, we're going to shoot the school. Well, I get it. A student brings it to me, and I'm like, oh, gosh, this is like October, and my first assistant principal job, and the principal was a very tough lady. So I take it to her, and she's like, what would you do? What should I do with this? I'm like, I'm thinking, well, you're in charge. Like, I don't know. So she looked me dead in the eye, so I looked her back dead in the eye. I was like, I think you should call it in. Now you got to take it. It's credible, right? And so turns out it was credible, and there were things that happened because of that. But later on, because of that situation, we had so many other smaller situations, but quickly she put all that trust in me right there as a new guy. I'm like, oh gosh, like if this goes bad, then we search the whole school. Like I'm out. But I think she, it just worked out. But that was a really hard thing to do because she retired 1 year later with like 33 years in.
Wow.
And this is my first semester, and so like that was a really tough thing. But from that moment on, we had a different conversation every time, a different relationship with everybody else that works with her. It was totally different. It just worked out. But that rings true to me. I lived that, and hearing you say it, that trust and that feedback, and just being truthful. Yeah, making it work.
I think it's so easy for managers in so many different settings of just, you come, you bring that situation from Yik Yak. Also, that's a throwback. I haven't heard that.
I didn't even know what it was.
That is so funny.
I'm not a social media person.
Oh man.
Oh man. It's so easy, I think, as managers to, say, hey, I do it this way, or we should do it this way. And, just step in. Because again, she had been in that industry, in that role for, 30 plus years, but what an impact, one, it had on y'all's relationship, but two, developing you as a leader to say, hey, what do you think? What do you think we should do?
Do you remember, were you in the session out at Dirt World with J.P. Donnell? Mm-hmm. Remember him?
Yep.
So I've been hooked on his podcast. I think I'm on episode whatever.
With Echelon Front.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and I was a Jocko fan before that, but in listening to his, he's always like, I would do some really dumb things, and those leaders, Jocko and Leif Babbitt, were like these superhuman dudes. Like, you don't want to make them mad. Mm-hmm. But he always talks about, he could go to them and be like, hey, well, I see your plan, but how would it look if we, and not that I think you're wrong, but how would it look if we did it this way? And then they would do it down to him too, so they were leading up and down, and hearing him talk about that, and not just like, should we make it red or black? Should we attack or retreat kind of conversations? Like,
wow.
Live rounds are coming, and they're having these up and down conversations. And that's really interesting. And his phrase is always to each other, how would it look if we? And I think that's always been something really, listen to his first podcast, he talked about that, but he talked about it out there too. Really incredible story. Those guys. What is your personal philosophy about the next big thing? You're young. You're younger than me. You're very obviously intelligent, motivated, got 1,000 things you could do. But what's your philosophy about, to those young professionals out there, about what's next? They're growing, looking, wanting the huge corner office. How do they get there? How do you teach them how to get there?
That's really good. That's really good. Where are you going to learn? I think is my biggest piece of advice. And again, I'm a millennial. I'm younger. Hopefully there's a lot more years to my career professionally and what's ahead. But I think, it's easy, especially, the Great Resignation. We saw more job turnover than, probably the last 20, 30 years as a whole. There's a crazy stat I saw the other day. Between 2022 and 2023, I think 51% of people who were offered a job declined or ghosted the job opportunity. And it's just, when asked why, it's like, I had better opportunities and decided to make a shift. And again, not that that's a bad thing, but I think loyalty, sticking around, putting your head down, being loyal to people, and then two, just finding people you can learn from. And, I think more and more the millennials and younger people professionally that want to set themselves apart, that want the corner office, they're not asking the questions, why aren't you pouring into me, manager? Or I'm not getting enough, development. They're going out and finding it. And, aggressive learners, people that want to learn, people that want to be coached, just set themselves apart. And I don't think you have to be the smartest in the room, but, where are you going to learn the most? And that's how I think about things. I don't want to, I don't want to cap out. I'm young. I hope there's a higher ceiling for what's ahead. But especially being a former educator and someone that just loves learning, I want to be where I can learn. And I believe that, where I learn the most, I'll probably have the most professional opportunity, which will probably result in the most financial opportunity. And so, again, that's not my driver, but if, 23, 22, 18-year-old kids saying, where should I go? Find somewhere, be loyal, stick around, and find people you can learn from.
Great advice.
What do you see among the people you recruit? And is that the word to use?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Recruit. So you've got a company out there, and they're saying, "Hey, we need this candidate," and you're recruiting. What are the biggest questions right now that people are asking about? Why should I take this job? Why should I move from place A to place B?
Mm-hmm.
How is this going to affect my career track? What are the questions those folks are asking? Because here's why I asked that. We have a ton of people who come into our courses and through our colleges from all different categories.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we had some crazy stories this morning and crazy stories on the show, but some are professional, some are not. Some don't even have a high school diploma.
Mm-hmm.
Some are just got out of incarceration.
Mm-hmm.
So what are those questions that they're all asking about how to find their next thing?
That's great. Yeah, we see a whole scope of questions and responses when we're building relationships with people. And, I hate to say, I think for good or for bad, probably the most common question is, how much does it pay? How much can I make? And those are great questions. We don't work for free. I don't work for free. Y'all don't work for free. But I think it's the wrong question. And again, it kind of shows where your priorities are. I think, the highest caliber candidates, I'll give y'all an example. Mm-hmm. We did an executive search this year for a civil contractor. It was a vice president of civil construction. Did a really long pre-search process trying to build out the ideal profile of the person we were looking for. And we connected with an awesome candidate. He was in that role for a similar company, and he had been with his company for 31 years. He co-opted with them in college. Wow. And so he had never known anything different. And, he was content with where he was at, but his biggest question is, where do they want to grow? And what's the upside? How can I help? And getting to know him better, we could just tell, he's a pioneer. He wants to build something. He's a learner, and he wants to make an impact. And, it was a great financial opportunity, but that I could just tell, and everyone could tell that wasn't his only driver. He wanted to build something. And again, those are the things we want to discover with candidates, even younger candidates. I think some of the folks that have had the biggest impact of, hey, how can I grow? Who's there that's going to, pour into me? We've had younger folks recently say, hey, I know I can be X over here, but I really want some more gray hair in the room. And that is a huge light bulb in my head of, awesome, this is great. Yeah. That's such a positive, again, because I know that company is getting someone who wants to come in and learn. And two, it's a really humble thing to say because regardless of if it's true or not, a 25, 24-year-old, 18-year-old kid who says, I've got it figured out, it's just not true. It's just not true.
Yeah. Wisdom brings time, like it builds over time as well. And being able to say, hey, I want to learn from someone who's wise and had those experiences, exposure to that. That says a lot about someone. Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm young. I'm 29. I'm not. I'm 43. So I was actually just talking to somebody a couple days ago about, and he started his career same time I did. He's in private world. I'm in the state.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got really like, with all the sick leave, I could take a semester off, but I could retire in 5 years. You know, at the end of this year, I'll have 20 years in, but I'm thinking I'll be 49. What in the world am I going to do? You know, and then I look around at these companies I deal with, and I see like the best companies have that right mix of gray hair on the staff. And so, and I wonder like, okay, well, what's it going to be like when I'm a gray hair? You know, so I'm speaking to, you know, kind of some of these things, but what are you looking at for people when they are going to maybe shift industries? How do you recruit to those individuals? Or when companies are looking for a job and they say, hey, we don't care if they're in this basket for a long time. These are the traits we need. And you find somebody that's not in that same world. So how do you take someone who's moving from one sector to another and coach them into this new thing?
Yeah. No, that's great. You know, it's hard in our industry. I get that question a lot. And, you know, primarily I'm serving folks in the architecture, engineering, construction industry, mainly construction. And with that, you know, I get a lot of calls often or text, hey, meet my buddy. You know, he's in marketing or he does this. He wants to break into construction or get into this. And, you know, it's hard, one, because, you know, you can't help everybody. And two, you know, we are paid by our partners for finding them a specific person. And so it doesn't mean that, you know, hey, that person can't get into construction per se, but in a lot of ways, you know, this probably isn't advantageous for me to say this, but to be honest, it's a barrier. You know, if someone wanted to go through me to get hired by X company, if they're going to pay me to make that introduction, but they have no experience, it might make a barrier for them to get hired. And so sometimes, you know, I love giving advice. I love kind of coaching people along. If I were a business owner, here's maybe what I would do. And, you know, I had a guy call me the other day and say, hey, what would I need to do to get hired into construction or for this general contractor? And I basically said, you know, based on your experience today, you'd probably be a project engineer. You probably wouldn't be able to come in at that project manager type level, and it might be good for you to, you know, either go take an entry level job somewhere, or maybe you should go, you know, get a degree and work on a master's of construction management. And so that's tough. I think, again, it depends on the industry. It depends on where you're coming from. Again, I'm super grateful for making an industry transition. But the more and more I think about it, I'm like, man, I'm pretty lucky I got this job. This is great. Because I don't know if I'm on the other side of the table, you know, hiring someone with my experience, there was no reason outside of the soft skills per se that I would have gotten this job. So I don't know if that answers your question directly, but
It does, because I see a lot of times older principals who retire go and do a lot of things, you know, and a lot of times it is sales or consulting or sometimes like administrative roles in companies, because they've been, especially if they were coaches and then principals, they've been making decisions and meeting deadlines and dealing with scrutiny and conflicts forever. So I just wonder, like, and it's kind of a personal question. I'm not going anywhere. She's my boss, but it's just like, well, what does it look like when people do make that transition? And as I get older, I'm going to meet more people who are trying to figure out what is next for them. So it's just interesting. And obviously you have to have certain skills, knowledge, whatever, degrees, but it's just an interesting thing for me because I'm in that season of life. Kind of thinking, do I go home and fish all the time or do I go get something else? And so
fishing every day also isn't too bad.
Well,
Okay. That's what my son and husband would say for sure.
That's awesome. It's interesting. We've seen there's actually a company, Hoopaw Grading, that's up in Charlotte.
Yeah.
That was they
were
at
there.
River.
I remember them.
And I was talking to their training and development leader, she's really building out all their training curriculum for like field employees, new employees, just totally changing the way they think about learning and development. And she was a middle school principal for 20 years, maybe elementary principal. But again, I feel like, you know, the sky's the limit in terms of opportunity. Just in some ways, you know, I wouldn't say, hey, if you were trying to make that transition, you know, maybe go through a recruiter. Again, maybe that's not super advantageous for me to say, but I think it's honest.
Yeah. You mentioned something earlier about, you know, helping individuals find out, maybe there are some barriers. Maybe they don't have exactly the experience that they need to move into a certain role. What do you say to those individuals? Like, here's some programs that we're working with certain colleges in the state, or our 2 years college system is obviously, we're part of the community college system, but to help someone find, where do I bridge that educational gap? What are some things that you all do to help point them in that direction? I say that to say, with the Innovation Center and what we do on a daily basis is try to figure out how we build those trainings to fill those gaps. And we've actually heard from many organizations across the state, some of our state associations, that there is a skills gap. From those who started out as entrepreneurs who didn't have any type of post-secondary education and training, but yet they are leading organizations. And when they go to make a change, they're missing some of those skills that they probably would have learned had they been on some type of training pathway. So how through the Innovation Center, we're always open to ideas and how do we fit the training needs within our state. What are you seeing right there in that realm that you could say, hey, Innovation Center, here's some things that I'm seeing as a recruiter because I'm serving the needs of businesses across not just the state, but the nation. And a lot of these companies have a footprint across our state, whether it's from the Huntsville to Mobile or vice versa. We have many construction companies even per se that they don't just serve in the state, but they send their crews out to other states to work as well. But what are some of those gaps that, from a training aspect? I know you said y'all are doing a lot of the leadership training, but what are some of the other things that through programs like the ACCS Innovation Center, we could say, hey, that may not be something that exists, but, based on the resources and the way that we can build curriculum is something we could look at?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in a lot of ways, if let's say I'll stick to construction because, again, that's how we met and that's where I spend a lot of my time. But, if I wanted to go work for a heavy highway contractor, I have no experience. I don't know how to work a dozer. I don't know how to work an excavator, a skid steer. There's no reason that they should hire me. I think, one, y'all have done a great job in terms of thinking through, how do you get someone that's never touched it to be competent, to at least get hired, and then from there, taking them through the training. I think it'd be advantageous to think through a step further of, hey, if I didn't want to get in the field, if I didn't just want to go to the field and become an operator and then become or a laborer or a foreman or whatever that looks like, I want to be in the office. I want to work and be a project manager and estimator. What kind of programs could we put in place to help someone transition that, maybe has been an accountant that, again, we could actually have some sort of strategic initiative of, hey, you take these 3 or 4 training programs on construction management and, 2 of these are a field internship. And so I don't know what that could look like, but I think more and more as the construction industry faces more of a workforce development problem where over the next 10 years, you're going to have 40% of the construction workforce that retires.
Right.
How do we try to bridge the gap for, there's going to be a demand. With that's going to come more financial opportunity for a ton of people. I think you're going to see college education more or less for 4-year degrees. Again, there's still a ton of value in it, but it's not the only way.
Right.
And so how can we try to solve that problem by providing more opportunities for folks that maybe have experience already?
Yeah. That's it.
That's a really good answer. Did you say 40% of the construction workforce is going to be gone in less than 10 years?
I believe it's the next 10 years. By 2034, and I don't know how updated those numbers are, but last I saw, I believe subcontractors to commercial general contractors, there's just a huge gap. And you've got a lot of gray hair in the construction industry. And the demands for infrastructure, demands for even private work is just continually growing.
So I'm going to follow up that statement with a question. So we serve with Skills for Success. We serve industries, so incumbent workers. We serve incarcerated populations, open enrollment, whoever's out there. We also serve a lot of K-12, high school sophomores, juniors, seniors. And so you'll have students who have taken, juniors and seniors who have taken skid steer, dozer, roller, excavator. And maybe they're not an expert in any of it. They aren't an expert in any of it, but they know that they like it. So just for industry support, because you have a unique aspect, a unique insight of all this, are we on the mark, and you can say yes or no, are we on the right track of advertising these courses, exposing the students to the training to see if they like it or not, And then when they do like it, we connect them to the companies or connect them to the programs at the colleges that take them on that road, or they just get a job and go do it. Do you see that as beneficial to that 10-year cliff that we're screaming towards?
I think that, you and Chris talked about this a good bit at Knife River at the Dirt World Conference. And, in a lot of ways, Alabama's not been on the forefront for so many things, but it seems like more and more y'all are on the forefront of this. I mean, y'all are leading a charge in the state that's truly unlike, what we're seeing in so many states around the country. And so, yes, I think my answer would be absolutely yes. And we talked about this a while back, but, the goal is not to say, hey, this is for you, because it's not going to be for everybody. Not everyone wants to work in construction, or not everyone wants to go work in food and beverage or be a CDL, but giving them the exposure to just answer the question, do you like it or not? And if you don't, that's great. You don't. But if we're not exposing them to it, then they're not going to know. I think with that, there are a few contractors, C.W. Matthews in Atlanta, Strack in Atlanta, have done some super unique things in targeted focus for recruitment of high school kids. And again, it's just posing the question, do you like it or not? And I think the more and more we can get it into classrooms and get principals on board, even from my background working, again, in urban education with Sydney Sullen, who now works with y'all.
That's right.
Sydney and I helped a lot of students get into the lineman program with Alabama Power that exposed them to a great opportunity where I've got a 19-year-old kid coming back in my room saying, Coach Cottingham, I'm making $70,000.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I've got a 7% 401k match, and that's going to be life-changing for that kid.
That's right.
Absolutely. We had that conversation just Friday with some folks from some line worker programs and considering what that looks like for them. That's good feedback. And I hope that you'd given us that answer of, yeah, you're doing it right. We went to C-Strack. When I came back from Oregon, I sent Tom and Matt, our career readiness folks, over to their grand opening of their big site. And they came back with all kinds of trailer, mobile simulator trailers. And we're working right now. We've got some money from the legislature to buy simulators that can be literally rolled off of an enclosure, probably out of a truck bed if you could get people to pick it up. It's that small, but when you unroll it and unpack it, it's like, it's a full screen, 20 different machines on it, trucks, fire trucks, heavy equipment, all kinds of things, even an ambulance, even a police van.
Wow.
But literally you could put 3 or 4 in an enclosed trailer and roll it off the trailer on its own wheels into a classroom, plug it into an outlet, open it up, and it goes. So now you can take it to a training site. You can take it to a middle school classroom. Oxford City Schools wants us to bring it to their 5th, 6th grade intermediate school for Career Tech Day. Whenever we get them. So to your point, though, that's the whole thing. That's what we took. If there's one thing we took from Dirt World, it was cycle time in our courses, in our labs or heavy equipment, and then taking the simulators down into the elementary. Even those are the biggest things.
That exposure you were talking about. Yep.
Because that little girl gets on that thing and they feel that joystick and that excavator as it jumbles that seat when they're digging through the imaginary dirt. Man, you love it or you hate it. And now it's on like Donkey Kong. So Nick told us a long time ago that we were out of time, and we do it every time. And he's so gracious; he does such a good job. But we do need to kind of close it out with the final thoughts from you, Ben. Where are we headed in Alabama as in the nation workforce? What's next for us collectively?
Yeah, I think I'm really excited to see what's ahead just from y'all's focus and initiatives of workforce development, specifically just with, heavy highway contractors, I know is kind of the context which I was exposed with, but I think it's solving a huge problem. I think you're getting, power brokers in the room that are competitors fiercely on projects, but they're working collaboratively to solve a huge problem. And I'm excited because I'm thinking through how can we multiply the impact into every state? How can we do this in Mississippi? How can we do this in Georgia? And I know there's a lot of folks in Atlanta that are pushing strong initiatives, but I think y'all have given just a really awesome model and honestly buying into this abundance mindset of just sharing ideas that it gets me excited for someone that is trying to solve the workforce development problem at another angle. But I'm excited for what's ahead in Alabama. I think just the work y'all doing is amazing, and I'd love to see it continue to make an impact here, but also in other states.
I love that. I love that optimism. I'll tell you this. I'm going to extend a personal invitation. You can peruse at your own level or own time. We just today, like an hour ago, Kayla Dozier, our director of marketing,
Mm-hmm.
corporate partnerships. Our lab calendar is on our website, trainforalabama.com.
Mm-hmm.
Shameless plug. This is our show, so we can. It's not really
I was
shameless.
about to say, it's not shameless.
But we have on there, it'll say lab calendar, and you can go on there as Ben Cottingham at FireSeeds and say, well, here's some labs I want to go to in my
Yep.
area. Click on it, add it to your calendar, talk to the people who are organizing it.
Yep.
And so if you're a contractor or if you're just interested, you
Mm-hmm.
can go in there and go see it.
Yep.
Wow.
So 23 colleges across the state are offering Skills for Success. All of the industry opportunities of training that we have in our course catalog right now that the colleges are training on, you can see it live.
Mm-hmm.
Click on one, find the location, tell them you're on your way,
Wow.
and be able to connect with students while you're there, and be able to, hey, invite other employers to say, hey, if they've got a skills gap and they've got a workforce need, hey, I know some training that's happening throughout
Yeah.
the state, and here's how to find it. So
That's awesome.
So to your
Yeah.
point of the exposure and exploration, Kayla and Destiny Smith, our workforce manager, they've been working on that for months, and they
Yeah.
finally got it dialed in. Just asking the
it's fabulous.
not 5 why, it's probably more like 28 why.
Yeah.
But we got it. So I'll connect you to that link just so you can have a look at it and see. And the other invitation also is watch us and see what we're doing. And when you see a gap, call us out on
Yep.
it. And you're in, I'm sure you're professional, polite way, but we're willing to take that advice because I saw how you connected all those different folks out there in Dirt World. I'm like, well, this guy's got it figured out. So
I don't know if I've got it figured out, but hey, we talked about leading up. So
Yeah.
if I need to lead up, I can do that for
Yeah.
sure. And same goes for me.
yeah,
Appreciate
absolutely.
that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Ben Cottingham from FireSeeds. Engaging conversation, man. I've never taken almost 4 pages of
I know.
notes.
I was watching you. I was
My
like,
hand
"Whoa,
hurts.
look at that."
So good stuff. All right, if there are no other final thoughts, then we need to get off the air because we've been over almost an hour now, so it's good.
All good stuff. Thanks, Ben, for joining us today. Thanks, Houston, and all of our listeners out there. Thanks for joining Innovation Unplugged. And we hope that you can like, follow, listen, share, all of those wonderful things on all platforms. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thanks for being here, man. This is really good.